Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room for this weekend's main event. Alexander Volkov against Curtis Blaydes. Pretty straightforward fight to break down, if I'm honest. Obviously, exactly what you would expect from both fighters. Curtis Blaydes, he's a strong wrestler, dominant in the top position, great ground and pound, covers distance very quickly, has got a lot of drive in his takedowns, as well as his straight punches, which are going to be useful in this fight. Volkov, on the other hand, is a very experienced kickboxer. He's a very tall fighter. He's 6'7", very rangy, uses his reach very well as well. I mean, there's a difference between being tall and using your reach well. I'll get into that in a second. And what else? I mean, experience. He has a lot of experience. There are certain things that Volkov is going to have an advantage in this fight. If he can keep this fight at distance, he's going to be able to pick Curtis Blaydes off. Obviously, that's what he's going to want to do. If you're Curtis Blaydes, you want to close distance quickly in this fight and get this fight to the floor. He's definitely the superior wrestler in this fight. There's no doubt about that. As far as height goes, I thought this was quite interesting. So Curtis Blaydes is 6'4", Volkov is 6'7". It always seems like a 6'7" fighter is much taller to us because we're not that tall. I mean, if you're out there and you're 6'5", 6'6", then it makes sense. They're not that tall. If you're 6'4", 6'7" is not that tall. By comparison, Cowboy is 3 inches taller than Conor. It made no difference in that fight. So just as a point of reference, although Volkov is the taller fighter, it's not a massive advantage like you would think. Wikipedia and UFC stats has split. UFC stats has got them both at an 80-inch reach. Wikipedia's got Volkov with an inch reach advantage. It's much of a muchness when you're talking about an inch. It's much more about how you fight and whether you can use your reach well. Volkov is very good at using his reach. We saw that in the Stefan Struve fight, and that's probably the first time in Volkov's career that he's given up height and reach to an opponent, and he still looked like the taller fighter in there. If you watch that fight back, he uses his reach very well. He looks like the taller fighter. He keeps Stefan Struve on the end of his jab, and he's able to pick him off at range. And if he can do that to Curtis Blaydes, then it's going to be a long, frustrating night for him. If I'm Volkov, I'm focusing on that center channel because if Curtis Blaydes is going to cover distance, he's going to come straight forward. I would expect him to come forward with his jab. He's got a very good long jab as Curtis Blaydes, and I expect him to use that jab to try and push forward before setting up his takedowns. Clean, basic punches, a jab cross down the center. I don't think he's going to do a great deal more than that. Blaydes wants this fight on the floor where he can use his ground and pound. So if I'm Volkov, I'm thinking about that center channel. I'm thinking about my knees and my uppercuts. He's got decent takedown defense, but he has been taken down by, Roy Nelson took him down. Who else took him down? He's been taken down a couple of times anyway. He's not, Verdum took him down, which is where this canvas is from. To answer all the questions that we always get in the comments. Oh, that's a UFC canvas. Yes, it's a UFC canvas. It's from UFC London. And that's so I can clone Fabricio Verdum someday and enter him back into the UFC and maybe try and win a heavyweight title again. Anyway, that's future plans. Volkov was taken down by Verdum. Obviously, he won that fight in the later rounds, but he has been vulnerable to getting taken down. I would say that Curtis Blaydes is probably the best wrestler that he's faced, definitely the best fighter he's faced in the UFC. Which is another point to cover, actually. Is probably the best wrestler he's faced in the UFC. If you go back into Volkov's career, I don't know a lot of the fighters that he fought early on, but he was fighting in M1, he was fighting across Russia, he was fighting some very, very tough wrestlers, I would imagine. So I would imagine his takedown defense is pretty good. I would imagine he's scrambled back to his feet a bunch of times as well in fights that I've not been able to find when I'm researching. So I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. The other thing as well, which is interesting on UFC stats, average fight time for Volkov is 15 minutes, and that's not great when you've not had many 5-round fights. What I will say to counter that is that these UFC stats are only based on their UFC career, or if they're Strikeforce or whatever. I went back and had a little look, and Volkov had actually got at least 13 first-round finishes. Again, there are some fights on his record that it just says win or, TKO. It doesn't tell you when, but he's definitely got at least 13 first-round finishes. So he has got the potential to stop people. I wouldn't say he's necessarily a power puncher. He's an accurate puncher. He's a sniper. He's able to catch people with combinations as they're coming in and utilize their power against them when they're moving, covering distance. If he can do that with Curtis Blaydes, he's going to be able to catch him as he's running in. He's going to be able to catch him, with his long-range punches, and then that central channel, like I talked about, knees to the midsection, uppercuts to catch him on the chin. Many times in Curtis Blaydes' career, we've seen him caught and hurt, and he's been rocked, and he's been reeling, and he's managed to get the takedown. Blaydes, I would expect him to be able to get this fight to the floor as and when he likes. I think this is, Volkov, interestingly, I had a quick look at the odds. He's actually the biggest underdog on the card at the moment, according to the odds, which, it doesn't surprise me necessarily, but I think that's going to shift closer to the time. There are lots of ways for Volkov to win, but I do think it is Curtis Blaydes' fight to lose. I think he's got a great power double. I think he can set it up with his jab and drive this fight to the floor. And then, I think he's got the wrestling to be able to at least keep Volkov down there and tire him out. And he only needs one opportunity to land those elbows. You got to think the impact that he had on Alistair Overeem. He took him down, he dominated him, he landed elbows and opened him up very, very quickly. That was a mess, within seconds of the referee stopping the fight. It made such an impact on Alistair Overeem that he packed up his stuff and he went and trained with Curtis Blaydes. So you can imagine what kind of impact that had on Alistair Overeem, who at the time, we talk about veterans and we talk about Volkov having experience. What is he, 31-7? It's a lot of fights. Still not as many as Alistair Overeem. So experience doesn't always pay off. Sometimes someone is just very, very good at something, and I feel very much like Curtis Blaydes is a threat to that title. I think he's a good enough wrestler and big enough to cause DC real problems, and I think he's big and strong enough to be able to get a hold of Miocic. We've got to watch out for this guy, and I think this is a good opportunity for him to prove that. I think we know what we're getting with Volkov. I think he's a good fighter, a durable fighter. I think he maybe lacks the power to be able to stop him with one shot, and I think he might find himself on his back a lot. I've also only been able to find one triangle as well on his record as far as submissions off his back. 2 rear naked chokes. I'm not saying he's not going to get the fight, get the submission on the floor. With someone of that kind of experience, you would expect he's got a well-rounded game, even if we've not seen it yet. But there's no secret he wants to keep this fight standing where he can utilize his best weapons. Is there anything I've forgot? Long-range jab, takedowns and elbows. Curtis Blaydes' elbows are ridiculous. They're very, very quickly damaging, and I'm excited to see if he can. One thing to consider: can he land his elbows if he's in Volkov's guard, or is Volkov's body so long that he's not able to catch him? I don't know. Volkov has an unusually long body that stood out in the Verdum fight. I actually remember commenting on it during the commentary. Volkov, center channel, uppercuts and knees. Obviously, he's fought a lot of shorter fighters. Roy Nelson was a good example of him, working the body. Roy Nelson has been a punching bag for a lot of heavyweights, and it's a good example of techniques that work very well against someone that comes straight forward in a line with a pretty predictable game. Takedown defense is going to be key. His takedown defense isn't bad as far as his stats go. What we've got, 76% takedown defense. Like I said, I don't think he's fought anybody like Curtis Blaydes before that brings that kind of wrestling intensity. I think that's going to be very problematic for him. He's got very, very low submission attempts, 0.2, but then Curtis Blaydes has 0 submission attempts. He wants to smash you to pieces with elbows. It's a very, very straightforward game for Blaydes. Close distance, get him to the floor, probably even pass guard, and then land some elbows and cut him. Just remember the damage that Stefan Struve did with that glancing knee that did a lot of damage to his cheekbone. Very, very easy to work on that cheekbone now. It's been damaged. Lots of things that I would be considering if I was Curtis Blaydes. And with a nickname like Razor, you've got to expect some blood. So enjoy the fights. Catch you next time.